Jack, first for you, question is, you talked about the farmer as a storyteller. Where do we typically fail? Where are we failing and falling short?
Well, I think that it's difficult. I think that by and large, people aren't comfortable telling their own story, and that none of us are necessarily excited to tell strangers what we do. So I think it's something that's difficult for everyone. Scientists, I think, are not particularly good at it either, so it's not as if farmers are somehow worse than anybody else. But I think that we're in a different world, and it goes a lot back to what was being said about the importance of transparency and people wanting to know the provenance of their food. So I think people are actually interested for the first time. Historically, people haven't really been asking about the story of the farmer, and for the first time they are. And you know, when I grew up, we had a family garden that was probably 2 or 3 times bigger than this room, and I tell people we were subsistence farmers and we were organic because we had child labor, which was me and my brothers. And if somebody and my mother canned all of our food, and we traded for a side of beef with a neighbor. And looking back, if anybody had asked us about agriculture, we didn't even know we were part of agriculture. You know, we just thought that was a garden. And so I think the nature of things has really changed, though, and so we need to be more willing and stepping forward. So it's not that anybody's doing a bad job, it's they're being asked to do a new job.
Good. Richard, over to you. A couple of questions as we talk about traceability, and really it was the emphasis is where does IBM go next as we talk about from the producers the processor back up into the supply chain and dealing with individual producers, and where do you see that headed?
Okay, so yeah, if you looked at the GSF video, for example, that's a pilot. You know, blockchain technology right now is in its infancy. You know, think the internet 30 years ago. That's pretty much, or maybe 25 years ago. That's where we are with blockchain technology today. A lot of the activities that you read about in the press and the activities that we're doing at IBM is all about piloting and making sure that this technology is going to do what it says it's going to do on the can, and it's all about you know, addressing problems. You know, what's the problem that it's going to address? So what we did, you know, we started, if you remember from my slide, we started with Walmart. That's grown now to, I believe we've got over 20 of the larger organizations. And, you know, because most people today have a smartphone, this technology is going to be, you know, ubiquitous across the entire supply chain, because, you know, pretty much everyone, you know, from the farmer to the farm hand that's working in the field or with the cattle, should have some kind of smartphone in today's environment. So, you know, we see this really going all the way back to, you know, the name, you know, possibly, if it's valuable, the name of the person that picked the mango or, you know, harvested the cabbage, so that the consumer can have that transparent view, as we were saying, has that view straight back to it's the transparency back to its origin.
Good. Okay. Peter, this is over to you. I think the focus here is obviously, you know, how do we attract the best and the brightest minds back to rural America, and the question is becoming about, as we enter into fully automated manufacturing and more robotics, does that make a difference in terms of rural America, and maybe some of that manufacturing happens in rural America and we get brighter and better people, more educated people back on a more regular basis, something to that effect? Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the things is the move toward automation is because people are finding it hard to attract enough people to do a labor-intensive production process, plus labor is very expensive in the U.S. So you're going to have fewer people engaged in production. We produce a lot more manufactured products than we did in the past. We just do it with a lot fewer people. Mm-hmm. So it's not that you're going to be attracting larger manufacturing plants, meaning the number of people that they employ. They'll be larger in terms of their output, but fewer people. And the advantage of producing in a rural area is you don't have congestion costs, and the land costs are going to be lower. So I think the type of production process that you're going to observe in rural areas is going to be changing. There are 2 new meat packing plants coming in to Iowa, I think, in the next year. I'm really curious to see how labor-intensive those processes are going to be compared to the ones that opened up, say, around the 1980s, where there were new technologies related to boxed beef. I think these are going to have many fewer people engaged in the production. And you're going to see more like what you see in these other manufacturing plants, is they have to have somebody who turns the switch on and off, and that's about it, right? So I think that the real source of strength for the smaller towns in places like Iowa are going to still be the daily commute, the ability to access the metro markets, where there's substantial advantages in technology and shared innovation in these denser places. You would have thought the internet would make it more possible to have people everywhere, and in fact what's happened is the exact opposite. It's given a tremendous advantage to having more of the technological innovation occurring in places where you have lots of educated people in one place. And maybe that'll reverse, but it sure hasn't yet.
Okay, with that, I know there's other questions.
Can I just add?
Yeah, real quick. Yes, please.
One point on that. I think that sometimes we're worried about robotics and automation and what its impact is going to be on people's livelihoods, and we certainly should be. But I think one of the advantages of it is it reduces labor costs. And if it reduces labor costs, then transportation and land and other things become more critical to deciding where to locate a facility. Well, that's an opportunity to bring manufacturing back to the United States, because if transportation is the biggest part of the cost, then why in the world would you do it halfway around the world? So maybe there are fewer jobs, but those jobs don't need to be someplace else. So I think that it'll be interesting to see how it cuts. That's true.
Excellent morning. Please give these 3 gentlemen a round of applause. Really good.